Welcome to another episode of the Empowered Half Hour, and I am so happy to bring you today's guest. I have with me Mike Coy, who is a man of many things. He is a certified professional behavior analyst. He is a registered financial advisor. He's an author. He's a speaker. He's a musician. He is a coach and he's a cancer survivor. And he has a lot of messages to share with us today. And what I think is going to be really interesting for you guys as the listeners is that outside of Mike being a man of many things, he's a man of deep meaning. And I have only got to speak with him a few minutes before we hit record. And I can share that I can sense and share with you guys that there's a lot of depth that comes from the messages that he wants to share. So I'm excited to get into this and see what we can bring to the listeners today. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Becca. I'm very honored to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I opened up with sharing that you're a man of many things, but let's get into the backstory a little bit. How did you get to this place of wanting to share deeper meaning and impact with the world and the people you come in contact with through your work?
Well, I grew up an athlete. I had an opportunity to play this Texas-Louisiana professional baseball in the late 70s. I was the MVP in 78, and the New York Mets offered me a minor league contract, $425 a month and $6 a day meal money. I was making about $850, $900 a month selling clothes at Dakota's clothing store. I had a pregnant wife at home, and so the 425 just wasn't going to cut it. But I was able to take that and start coaching and just trying to make a difference. In this case, a young man's life, all the way through Little League, Senior League, high school baseball. And it just really came down to seeing how I could help somebody just be better, help a young athlete be better. But right before my father passed away, his last words to me were, "Son, make a difference." And I think from his standpoint, it was for me coaching. But as I've gotten older, going through cancer, I think it really does have a much deeper meaning of, again, trying to reach people, trying to talk to people, trying to mentor, try to coach, and again, just seeing if I can make a difference in somebody's life.
That really resonates with me in a deep way. And I feel that in life, we all have deeper meaning within us. And sometimes we go through these events like losing a loved one or going through cancer and surviving, or for me too, like I went through extreme burnout. I was almost hospitalized. I had 4 kids. I barely had strength to get out of bed, let alone do all the things that I had to do.
Yeah.
And when you have an opportunity to recover from that, I am relating to you in the sense that you feel very compelled to help other people thrive and to live well. And I want to pivot to the title of your book, I Choose Live, right?
Yeah, it's I chose live. I chose live.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about that a little bit. What went into your book and why did you choose that title?
I've never been sick a day in my life. I've had 4 knee surgeries. I had to get my Achilles fixed, but I mean, that's all sports related from years back. And all of a sudden, I was having a continuous sore throat and decided to say, well, after a while, it's a little bit annoying. And I go to the doctor, and the doctor tells me that I have a sinus infection. Now, I've got a tumor the size of your fist at the base of my tongue.
Yeah.
But I'm told that I've got a sinus infection. So I'm given antibiotics. I go back 6 weeks later, and they up the antibiotics. And all the antibiotics did was destroy my immune system. And on July 4th weekend in 2013, I went into the bathroom, and one of my lymph nodes had popped out like a golf ball out of my throat. And I said, well, that's not good. And so I took a picture of it. And I was in Atlanta, Georgia. I'd gone to home office with Aflac to be the director of recruiting and training for the state of Georgia. And I sent it to my ear, nose, and throat doctor, who was one of my closest friends. I coached his son in baseball. And he said, you got to get away from the primary and go see a specialist. So I basically forced my way to see a specialist. They took 9 needle biopsies. Now, if you've never had a needle biopsy, it's something that you really need to do once in your life because it will wake you up. Okay. And so they said, the doctor said, the specialist said, look, it's probably just an infection. Don't worry about it. We'll call you in a couple of weeks. Well, at the time, I was commuting back from Atlanta to Chattanooga. I'd moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, because there's no state income tax in Tennessee. So I wanted to get out of Georgia. And so I didn't make it back home before the nurse called and said, the doctor wants to see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
Oh,
So I
wow.
drove back to Atlanta, and the guy walks in, and his first three words are the three words no one ever wants to hear, and that is, you have cancer. And so all of a sudden, really, your life changes because you want to get well and you want to put your trust in the doctors. And so I immediately started 7 days, 7 nights of chemo in the hospital. 2 weeks later, 7 days, 7 nights, and then 12 outpatient. And when you start going through that, I didn't have a feeding tube. The oncologist said that if you have a feeding tube, your throat is going to atrophy. And the thing about it is, it wasn't so much a life death situation as it was they didn't know if they were going to remove my vocal cords or remove my tongue.
Oh, my
And for
goodness.
somebody with my background as a speaker and musician, it's like, that's not good. And so I started going through all my treatments. I ended up losing about 35 or 40 pounds that I needed to lose. By the way, cancer is a great weight loss program, but I don't recommend it to anybody. But I remember, and in anybody out there that's gone through chemo, gone through radiation and things like this, you have your good days and then you've got your tough days. And I remember one afternoon, I went out on my balcony and it was just a beautiful summer day. The wind was blowing. I was looking at the Chattanooga River and I felt this clump on my arm and I looked down and all this hair was on my arm. And I started doing my fingers through my head and I lost every hair on my head. Now the good news is I got my hair back. That's all I care
I
about. I
can
didn't care
see
about
that. I was like,
I, I
congratulations.
don't I don't care about the tumor anymore. I just wanted my hair back. But I went inside and I sat down and I was flipping through the channels and I guess some TNT or something. It was Shawshank Redemption. I don't know if you remember that movie or
Yep,
not, but it's one
sure.
that launched Tim Robbins' career. But the guy was falsely accused. He was sent to Shawshank, and his first 6 weeks there were just a nightmare. I mean, he was beaten, he was raped, I mean, the whole thing. And they have a scene out in the yard where the great Morgan Freeman played Red. And he had been at Shawshank for 40 years. And Tim Robbins' character said, how can you stand it here? You've been here 40 years. I've been here 6 weeks. This is a living hell. And Morgan Freeman said, life is about choices. You either get busy living or you get busy dying. At that moment, I turned off the TV, I went to my desk, and I started to write, I chose live.
Damn.
And it's about my battle with cancer, how I'm winning the war, a lot of details about the cancer. And through the Aflac Children's Cancer Center in Atlanta, I went in and did a lot of research about different cancers and stuff. And it's just something that, again, when my dad said, make a difference, my life completely changed. And I think that there's a much deeper meaning now for me to be able to reach people and help them just make some differences in their lives. And for me, I chose live. And that's what it came down to.
That's really incredible. I had goosebumps as you were telling me that story. What is a lesson or an aha that you could share with the listeners? I'm sure there's many from what you went through. So if you want to share more than one, that's okay. But if there's some listeners out there that may have gotten a diagnosis, or maybe it's a different situation where they are facing something that feels life ending, even if it's not death, maybe a divorce or something that's life altering, and maybe is a better word. What kind of lessons have you learned and or ahas that you could share with the audience?
I think one of the biggest, I had really a handful of people that have asked me over the years, did you ever think about giving up? Did you ever think about just throwing in the towel? And I said, never. One, I had a 6-month-old grandson that didn't know me, and I had not walked my daughter down the aisle yet. Now, since then, I have 3 grandsons that probably wish they didn't know me. And I did walk my daughter down the aisle, and I've been blessed with a 5-year-old granddaughter that is her mini me. And I love it because of what she's doing to her, what she did to me, right? But again, it's that sense of purpose. I had something to latch on to. And I think so many people out there today go through depression, that go through hard times. And in the book, I talk about life's going to throw you a curveball. Now,
Right.
you've got to make a choice, and life is about choices. And you've got to make a choice if you're going to stand there and take it, or you're going to throw your hands and hit the ball opposite field and make something positive happen. I think about that great American philosopher, Rocky Balboa. Okay, I think about Stallone saying in all of his movies, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how you get up. And I feel like that if people can find that one purpose that can help them just see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and it's not an oncoming train. And obviously, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But I just feel like that we got to put this in perspective where life is about choices and you either get busy living or get busy dying. And whenever I give a talk and I talk about the book and such, I always end every one of my talks by saying, I hope and pray that you choose the same path that I chose. I chose live.
I relate to that so much. And I think it's such an empowering message. I mean, you can't really see because I'm holding it back, but I'm tearing up a little bit because it's meaning so much to me. And I think it's a really important message for the listeners. I remember I mentioned that I had extreme burnout on the day that changed my life. I hit the floor in extreme burnout after yelling at my kids when I got home from work. It was pretty bad. I blew up on them. And anyway, it was not my proudest mom moment. And when I was laying there on the floor, I felt the most powerless that I've ever had. And here I am as a sales executive. And on paper, my life looks like it's perfect, but inside I'm falling apart. And now I'm laying on the bathroom floor without the energy to stand up. And I'm like, how the heck did I get here? So I like the messaging of you're either getting busy living or you're getting busy dying. Because as I'm sitting there on the bathroom floor, I prayed up for help because I had nowhere else to go. And I'm like, I need some help because I don't know how to do tomorrow any differently than I'm doing today. And I'm just going to keep doing the same thing. So I need some help. And long story short, I heard a message in my head like, Becca, you are the CEO of your life. This is something a former VP of sales had told me. And when I was making some really good decisions. And so like that message, that voice immediately came back into my head of Becca, you're the CEO of your life. And I'm like, if I'm the CEO of my life, then I have a lot more power in this situation than I think I do. I can choose to live. So this is like where I'm circling back. I'm like, I've got 4 kids. I've got a husband. I love my life, but yet it's slipping through my fingertips. Like I have to choose differently. So I really enjoy hearing your perspective and your point of view on that, because it's a big part of my messages too, is that your choices either hurt you or they help you, and you can get busy making choices that help you.
Yeah, but Becca, you recognize what needed to be done. And I think that so many people are in denial. So many people are going to blame somebody else or blame their situation, or whatever it might be. And I just wish that more people could understand that they empower themselves. And we can do anything that we want. You can go, like I said, you can read books, you can go hear motivational speakers, you can do anything that is helpful for you. But unless you do it yourself and you recognize, I think that's such an important point that you are the CEO of your life. And so take charge. Make some positive stance. I just want to mention I've got 2 free gifts. I've got MikeCoySpeaks.com/gift. MikeCoySpeaks.com/gift. And I've got my 10 tips on how to prevent cancer. And I also have chapter 8 in I Chose Live, which I think is one of my most powerful chapters, just to help people recognize that there is an alternative, there is hope out there, and just don't give up. I use this all the time about when the ancient Spartans or the Greeks would land in a foreign land and they burned their ships because there was no retreat. You had to go through this enemy to be able to get back home. And I think so many times that enemy is right there in front of us. And I promise you that get help, get therapy. It's one thing I talk about in the book that men are so stubborn, they don't get checked. They don't go to the doctor. And our death rate is 58% higher because we won't go to the doctor. Well, it's the same thing as far as taking charge of your life. I've got my 10-year colonoscopy coming up July 1st. And I mean, that's something that I'm very diligent about. And it's not fun. It's not something that you look forward to, but it can help prevent. And that prevention is the key to disease. And the more that you can do to help prevent some kind of disease, especially cancer, then like I said in the book, that prostate cancer and colon cancer are the 2 main cancers for men. There's no easy cancer, but these are the 2 simplest to cure if you catch them early. And so that's my big message out there is that go get checked, go to the doctor, stay on top of it, and make a difference in your life.
That's great. I'm so happy that you mentioned that because I know we talked about that on our pre-call to this. And I'm just like, it's such an important message for men. So to all the male listeners, just go get checked. Don't be stubborn. If you feel something uncomfortable, go get it checked out. It's much easier to take care of yourself at the beginning of stages. Like you said, when we were talking on the pre-call, like when a lot of times when men do find out they're in stage 3 or 4 already.
And I mentioned the fact that as a musician, one of the songs that I open and sing a lot is Don't Let the Old Man In. And that was from the movie The Mule with Clint Eastwood. But at the end is this beautiful ballad by Toby Keith. And that's a great story. He was playing golf with Clint Eastwood and he goes, you got anything going? And Clint Eastwood said, well, yeah, I'm going to Texas to film this movie. I'll be gone for 6 months. And Toby Keith said, look, I don't mean to be rude, but how old are you? And Clint Eastwood said, well, I'm getting ready to be 89. And Toby Keith said, how do you do that? And Clint Eastwood looked at him and said, I just don't let the old man in. And that had such an impact on Toby Keith. He went back to the hotel room that night and wrote this beautiful song. But Toby Keith is a perfect example of somebody that had a tumor the size of a grapefruit in his stomach, but he thought it was an ulcer. And when he finally went to the doctor and gets checked, that he's got 3 to 6 months to live. And we lost this great American, this great artist. And I just wish that I could have reached him 3 years ago and said, go get checked. That's all part of my focus and part of my stance because it's something that has to be done.
So I want to go back to something else you had shared that I think is a great topic to unpack for the listeners. You said something along the lines of, it's not going to be easy. Like taking charge of your life is hard, right?
Yes.
But it's worth it. So I'd like to unpack that a little bit because so oftentimes, especially with the emergence of like social media being constantly in our face, we get to see the end results of, you're an athlete, but we get to see the end results of actresses, musicians, athletes, in their stardom, but they didn't get there with a magic wand. That was hard. Someone being in their peak health or their peak performance or their peak potential, they don't get there. They may get there with ease in the sense of they're using their gifts and talents, but it wasn't easy. And
Let me
so
tell
I'd
you
like
what, I had one of the greatest athletes I ever had the privilege to coach was Drew Brees, the quarterback for the
yeah, that's really
Saints
cool.
that's going into the Hall of Fame here pretty quick. Drew Brees was one of the greatest hitters I've ever coached. He threw right-handed, he batted left-handed, I bat left-handed. We had sessions and I would go in and I'd throw and he would just hit the ball perfectly. And we do a 30-minute session and I'd say, Drew, that's perfect. Don't change a thing. And he'd go, let's go again. Drew, it's perfect. I know, but let's go again. And the greatest athletes, I've had 7 young men that have made it to the major leagues. I've been able to coach so many young men that have played college baseball, played minor league baseball. The good ones are really good, but the great ones always want a little more. And I think that's one of the greatest attributes that you have with some of these singers and some of these actors and some of these athletes that they're really pretty good, but they want to be better. And the ones that I have been able to coach, the top level athlete that I've been able to coach, want to be great. And they do it with taking extra reps. I mean, you think about Larry Bird, you think about Magic Johnson, you think about some of these guys that would show up hours before a game, and Larry Bird would shoot 1,000 shots before he would ever take the court. That Michael Jordan, I mean, when you start thinking about some of these elite athletes, Michael Jordan didn't even make his junior high team.
I remember hearing this
And his
story,
mother
yeah.
said, work harder. Derek Jeter, the shortstop for the Yankees, was told every year, we're going to bring in this hot shot shortstop that's going to replace you. He was a shortstop for 20 years, and he said, the thing I made sure of, no one ever outworked me. So I think a lot of that goes back to the discipline, to the dedication, and just trying to be better today than I was yesterday.
I really love that message too. And I want to ask you like a follow up to that. How could someone take that message and apply it to their life? How can they use it to empower themselves?
Well, I think a lot of it is self-development, is that you want to read some books. One of my favorite books is The Psychology of Winning. Okay. And let's see, I got it here.
You're like, I have it here too.
Yeah. Dr. Dennis Waitley. I mean, this guy, I had the pleasure of speaking with him on an occasion, but meeting this guy. But there's different books out there that you can read. There's seminars that you can go to. There are online seminars and webinars that you can listen to that can help motivate you, that can help educate you, that help inspire you. Whenever I give my messages, and this is something, and this is a shameless plug, but if anybody wants a keynote speaker, I'm your guy. Okay. Because what I try to do is to motivate, to educate, to inspire. And all you want is one person to come up to you and say, you changed my life today. I am going to do this. I'm going to make some changes. I tell people, go look in the mirror and say, today is the first day of the rest of my life. And I'm going to seize this day. I'm going to seize this moment, and I'm going to do something positive. I'm going to pay something forward. I'm going to make a difference today. And every day, if you do that, I promise you, you'll start seeing. My kids will tell you my life is greatly defined as ACBC, before cancer and after cancer, because all of a sudden the perspective changes.
Shifted. Yeah.
And that's something that you have to grasp, you have to seize. And I try every day to make a difference, try to help somebody. And that just makes my life stronger and my life better.
Oh man, I'm like that. There's quite a few things that you said there that I'm like, I want to ask questions on. I might have to have you back because I know we're coming down to the bottom of the 30 minutes already. And I'm like, there's so much more. But I want to ask you another question. And you really ooze this, but I always find that when I ask this directly, I get a really awesome response. Why are you passionate about your work and your message?
Because I've lived it. I mean, I have, for an example, with my Aflac products and stuff like this, my major medical insurance picked up $250,000 of my cancer costs, but I was still out of pocket $26,000. My Aflac cancer plan, I bought this cancer plan years ago because I'm out in the sun a lot and I was worried about skin cancer. I didn't know I was going to get full blown esophagus throat cancer. But my Aflac cancer plan picked up 20,000 of that. My Aflac choice plan picked up 5,500 of the remaining 6,000. So I had almost $300,000 in cancer costs, and my total out of pocket was $500. So when people ask me, what is your why? Why Aflac, or, what is your why? I've lived it. I've seen what it can do. That gives me, I think, the platform to be able to go out to businesses and employers and business people and talk to them what we call the power of the Doug. But just to be able to go out and see it simply because I've lived it. I have seen what the difference that I have made with some young athletes that came out in summer baseball that couldn't walk and chew gum. And they call me a year later and they tell me they made the high school team. I mean, there's different things that you can do in your life that, again, can help make a difference. And I think that's where the key is that just being able to help people, to be a part of something. You've lived it. Now share it. That's the key.
I love that so much. So let's give the listeners, whether it's a one-liner, a favorite quote, but let's share with the listeners a parting message from you.
Mother Teresa said, I know that God grants me this ability to make a difference in somebody's life. I know that he trusts me to do the right thing, but sometimes I wish he didn't trust me so much. Again, it's that burden that we accept. It's that burden that we have that's part of life. And like I tell people at the end of every one of my messages, that I hope and pray you choose the same path, because life is about either get busy living or get busy dying. And I hope and pray each and every one of you, like me, I chose live.
Such a powerful conversation. I've loved every ounce of it. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, look, invite me back and let's just talk baseball. That's what I'd love to do.
I'm like,
hey, you were a competitive soccer player, soccer coach. So, that's my fun topic.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, there was so much that we talked about in here that I could have gone down rabbit holes on, but I was trying to stay focused. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I'd love for you to share with the listeners how they can stay in touch with you.
Yeah, it's ichoselive.com. ichoselive.com. And then go to the free gifts, the MikeCoySpeaks.com/gift, and get your 2 free gifts. But please reach out. Feel free to touch base. And again, if I can just touch one person on this broadcast, then I've done my job. You've done your job.
Yeah. I know we will. It was beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on.
I appreciate you, Becca. Thank you so much.